The night my family returned me like a defective product didn't begin with drama. It began with the soft clinking of champagne glasses, the hum of an orchestra rehearsing, and the kind of artificial warmth only crystal chandeliers can fake. The Grand AURELIA Hotel was dressed for a charity auction, the kind of event where wealth pretends to have a heart. My mother loved these nights. She said the lighting made our family look effortlessly important. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had a night shift at the hospital lab, and my body still carried that tired fluorescent glow you get when you spend too long under medical lighting. But my mother texted at 4:07 p.m., the kind of precise timing she favored. Wear something elegant, sit at our table, don't embarrass us. No emojis, never emojis. When I walked into the ballroom, nothing shifted. No head turned. No one noticed. I moved like a shadow stitched onto velvet carpeting. My family sat at a round table near the stage, illuminated by golden light. My mother lifted her eyes at me briefly, just enough to confirm I had arrived, but her smile reserved its real strength for the photographers clustered around her. I took my seat beside her. She didn't greet me. Instead, she snapped her fingers at a passing server as if orchestrating a scene for a movie I didn't audition for. "Lena," she said quietly, without looking at me. "Sit straight. Cameras are everywhere." As if my posture was the crisis here. The first wrong moment happened 5 minutes later. A server approached our table carrying a small black velvet pouch, placed it gently beside my plate, and stepped away. My siblings leaned in instinctively. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Margot tilted her head in anticipation. I thought, stupidly, that maybe my family was trying, in their awkward, brittle way, to surprise me. They knew I'd been offered a residency interview. They knew I'd been shortlisted for a trauma research grant. Maybe this was acknowledgement. My mother knew exactly what I was thinking. Her lips curved as she watched me through the reflection of her wine glass. "Open it," she said. "It's important." When I pulled the drawstring open, the soft velvet gave way to something much colder. A single envelope, black, heavy, embossed with gold lettering. My name, not Lena, just L. Hart, like I was a case file. My fingers hesitated before sliding beneath the flap. The world around me blurred, violins warming up, waiters weaving through tables, guests laughing in muted tones. Everything felt distant, irrelevant, suspended. Inside wasn't jewelry, or a note, or a gift. It was a formal document stamped with the seal of Hart Medical Foundation. Revocation of beneficiary status effective immediately. I felt something shift inside my chest, not break, just tilt. Like a picture frame finally falling after hanging crooked for years. I read it twice. The words didn't change. Signatures lined the bottom, my father's bold strokes, my mother's elegant loops, Adrian's impatient scribble, Margot's perfect cursive, all of them, every one of them, together. My mother lifted her champagne glass as if proposing a toast to my collapse. "Don't make a scene," she murmured, her smile still shining for the cameras. "It's better this way." My brother leaned close enough that I felt his cologne replace the scent of truffle oil and expensive perfume. "You'll be fine, Lena. You're used to scraping by." A pat on my shoulder, like consolation, like insult. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I folded the letter once, twice, then set it beside my untouched dessert spoon. No one at the table cared enough to watch the moment they erased me. But here's the part they never understood about me. I don't break loudly. I break inward in silence where echoes become strategy. I stood up, pushed my chair back, and walked away. No shaking hands. No tears. Just quiet steps across gold-threaded carpet. I left through the side door, slipping into the cool night air where no one followed. Where no one noticed I was gone. Because that's the thing about erasing someone. Sometimes you erase the wrong person, and they become the only one who remembers everything. That night I wasn't discarded. I was released. People like to pretend trauma arrives like lightning, loud, bright, dramatic. Mine arrived as patterns. Very organized, very predictable patterns. Growing up in the Hart household meant learning an alphabet of unspoken rules. My father, Dr. Marcus Hart, was a hospital board chairman who believed people came with expiration dates and measurable worth. My mother, Vivienne Hart, believed image was a currency and children were investments. And my siblings, Adrian and Margot, perfected the art of being exactly what our parents wanted: polished, compliant, photogenic. I was none of those things. I was the practical one, the quiet one, the child who read medical textbooks instead of gala invitations, the child who asked questions instead of smiling for donors, the child who was useful but never impressive. At dinner parties, introductions were rehearsed performances. This is Adrian, our future CEO. This is Margot, our rising star in public relations. And this is Lena. Short pause, she's very dedicated to her studies. Dedicated, a polite way of saying invisible. My mother once told a donor within my hearing range, "Lena is serious. She doesn't photograph well." I was 13. The donor laughed. "Every family needs a plain one." My mother didn't correct him. Our house always smelled of jasmine candles and disinfectant. Everything white, spotless, stiff. Even the affection felt sterilized. My father praised metrics, not emotions. As a child, I genuinely believed hugs were things families scheduled. But Mrs. Chen, my neighbor and retired ER nurse, was the only person who saw me without expectation. She'd sit with me on her porch while fixing her bonsai trees and say things like, "Quiet girls don't stay quiet forever. We just gather oxygen." She'd loan me medical journals, teach me how to listen with empathy, not with a stethoscope. I didn't realize until much later she was the first person who made me feel seen without performance. In high school, I got into an accelerated medical program. My family celebrated by congratulating Adrian for being accepted into a prestigious business leadership retreat on the same day. When I won a national award for a research paper, my mother said, "Beautiful work, darling, but try not to look so surprised in the photo." When I got into med school on a full scholarship, my father said, "Scholarships are for people who can't make it on their own merit." Everything I did was either minimized or reframed as luck, charity, or coincidence. I wasn't a daughter. I was a quiet utility, a placeholder, a proof that they were supportive parents, a name to add to the holiday newsletter. The problem wasn't that they didn't love me. The problem was that they loved the idea of me, small, grateful, manageable. Anything beyond that, threatening. By the time I reached my early 20s, I'd mastered the art of shrinking, speaking softly, moving around their egos like a delicate obstacle course, surviving by being unmemorable. Then something shifted. One afternoon, 2 months before the charity auction, I returned home early from campus and walked past my father's study. The door was slightly open. I heard my name, spoken in that cold administrative tone he reserved for board meetings. "Lena's stake complicates the merger. No judge will approve the trust restructure unless she consents," another man said. My mother sighed. "She doesn't even care about money. She'll sign anything. She always has." A lawyer corrected her. "She must sign voluntarily. Removing her without consent is illegal." Silence, heavy, calculating. Then my father said the sentence that rewired my entire understanding of my family. "We'll give her something she can't refuse, or remove her before she realizes her value." Before she realizes her value. I pressed my back to the wall, breathing in shallow, sharp bursts. For years I thought they ignored me because I didn't matter. Now I understood the truth. They ignored me until the moment I became useful. Not a daughter, a problem. A variable they needed to eliminate. That was the day I changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. I simply stopped being the version of Lena they trained me to be. I started observing, recording, collecting emails, saving documents, taking screenshots, not to destroy them, just to protect myself. Quiet girls don't retaliate, we prepare. The charity auction wasn't an accident. It was a culmination. A carefully staged execution wrapped in velvet and champagne. I didn't know that then, not fully, but the signs had been assembling themselves for weeks. After overhearing the trust conversation, I began noticing smaller details. My name disappearing from group emails. Lawyers visiting our home more frequently. My father taking calls that went silent the second I walked into the room. My mother's sudden interest in family unity when photographers were nearby. But the biggest signal came from my siblings. Adrian, once indifferent to my existence, suddenly became polite. He started asking questions no older brother had ever asked me before. "How's med school?" Need anything? Everything okay financially? They weren't questions. They were probes, trying to gauge how easily I could be pushed, bought, manipulated. Margot, on the other hand, shifted from passive-aggressive comments to overt guilt-tripping. You know how much Dad is sacrificing for the merger. The least you could do is support him. Support him. As if I wasn't the one funding my own education with 2 jobs and scholarship grants. As if I hadn't built my life without depending on any of them. Their arrogance was almost laughable. One night in January, I confronted my father, not aggressively, just a quiet question while he reviewed documents in the study. "Why do you need my signature?" He didn't look up. "Because it's the family trust," he said. "It belongs to all of us, and you're part of this family, aren't you?" My mother appeared in the doorway, smiled too tight to be casual. "Don't overcomplicate things, darling. Just sign when we ask." I walked away with a strange calmness in my chest. Not fear, recognition. They didn't see me as a person with agency. They saw me as a line on a ledger, and people like that, they don't apologize when they betray you. They justify it, then expect gratitude. The night before the auction, I sat in my small apartment with the city lights reflecting through the window. My desk was covered with copies of trust, documents, screenshots of emails, reports. I'd saved a folder labeled Heart Medical Ethics Violations. I hadn't collected them for revenge. I collected them because something inside me, the part Mrs. Chen nurtured, whispered, "They're preparing a blow, prepare a shield." Not a sword, a shield. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Guest list finalized. Wear the navy dress. Smile." The navy dress was her favorite, structured, conservative, the kind that erased my personality and replaced it with her idea of refinement. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and looked at the email from Dr. Morales that I had been too afraid to hope for. A residency interview, a chance at a new life, a door they couldn't close. The auction was supposed to be about charity. But for me, it became a battlefield where I walked in unarmed and walked out awakened. Because when they handed me that envelope, thinking they were removing me, deleting me, diminishing me, they didn't know I had already seen the blueprint of their betrayal. They didn't know the documents I saved were enough to freeze their merger, stall their plans, and expose their quiet corruption. They didn't know that the girl they trained to stay silent had learned how to speak, not with words, but with evidence. They didn't know the one they tried to erase was the only one who remembered everything. And they definitely didn't know that their letter didn't destroy me. It freed the version of me they were terrified to meet. The night of the auction should have left me hollow. It should have made me unravel. Most people imagine betrayal as something thunderous, a scream, a broken glass, a dramatic scene. Mine wasn't. Mine was quiet, surgical, a clean incision that hurt because of its precision, not its force. When I walked out of the Grand AURELIA Hotel, the city greeted me with a breeze sharp enough to feel like honesty. Chicago at night had a way of stripping pretenses. No chandeliers, no lenses, no perfectly staged smiles. Just concrete, headlights, and the hum of a city that didn't care who you were born to. I breathed in the cold air like medicine. My phone buzzed twice. My mother, Adrian, I didn't read either message. I let the screen dim on its own. The world felt painfully clear. Too clear. Each car that passed seemed louder, each street lamp brighter. By the time I reached my apartment, it was nearly midnight. The building smelled faintly of burnt toast from someone's late-night snack, and the hallway light flickered the way it always did when the wind pushed through the old window frames. Inside, the quiet wrapped around me like a thick blanket. My walls were bare except for a corkboard covered in sticky notes, grant deadlines, clinical schedules, research reminders. Real life. My life. A life I built without the Hart family signature behind it. I placed the velvet pouch on my desk and sat in silence. Then the shaking began. Not loud, not dramatic, just tiny tremors that rolled beneath my skin like aftershocks. My fingertips pressed into my temples as I leaned forward, breathing slow, controlled breaths. The kind you practice in trauma simulations, not real life. They didn't just revoke my beneficiary status. They revoked my existence from their curated universe. I wasn't angry. Anger requires expectation. I was tired of being the quiet one, the overlooked one, the footnote. A tear slipped down my cheek, slow and warm. It surprised me, not because I never cried, but because it felt like the tear belonged to the girl they raised, not the woman I was becoming. My laptop screen glowed softly from across the room. I walked to it slowly, like approaching a sacred object. At the top of my inbox was that email, the one I had reread 10 times but never allowed myself to believe. From Dr. Alina Morale's subject, residency opportunity. I clicked it open again, needing the reminder. I've reviewed your trauma care simulation research. It's bold, innovative, and needed. I'd like to interview you privately. You have something rare, Lena. A mind that doesn't need permission to change things. Permission, a privilege I never had growing up. Dr. Morales had no idea how deeply those words landed. She didn't see me as a shadow in someone else's spotlight. She didn't measure me by pedigree or family name or networking power. She saw me, the real me. For the first time in hours, I felt something warm in my chest. Fragile but present. Hope. I replied immediately. I would be honored. Name the time. After I hit send, I pulled out the folder labeled Heart Medical Ethics Violations. The documents inside weren't stolen secrets. They were things I stumbled upon over years of being overlooked. Things my family assumed I was too naive, too busy, too harmless to understand. Emails showing donor manipulation. Financial reports with inconsistencies. Fund allocations that didn't align with the hospital's stated mission. A memo involving Adrian and a restructured youth program that mysteriously vanished after donation cycles. I spread the papers across my desk, letting the reality of them settle. I'd never planned to use any of this. I'd saved them because something deep down told me I might need proof one day. Not revenge. Proof. The kind you keep when you grow up in a house built on image rather than love. I placed the revocation letter gently in the middle of the desk, like the final piece of some twisted puzzle. They thought they were ending something. They had no idea they were triggering the beginning of mine. The next morning arrived with a kind of stillness that felt almost ceremonial. The sky was washed in pale gray, the city humming with early trains and distant traffic. I moved through my apartment in quiet motions. Shower, coffee, clothes, each task grounding me, anchoring me. At 9:03 a.m., my phone pinged with a calendar invite from Adrian. Trust restructuring meeting Heart Medical Administrative Building 2 p.m. sharp. No explanation. No greeting, no apology. I stared at the screen for a long, measured moment. So this was it. Their final strike. The clean execution. I accepted the invite. Then I spent the next few hours printing, organizing, and securing every document I needed. My own records, not theirs. Documents proving my scholarship, my residency prospects, my research contributions. And separate folders with their unethical dealings. Sealed, time-stamped, and ready for legal review if I needed it. By 1 p.m., I was dressed in a charcoal suit that made me look older, sharper, more composed than I felt. The kind of suit that didn't beg for approval. The kind that demanded it. I tied my hair back, applied minimal makeup, and grabbed my folders. Before leaving, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked calm, not because I had nothing to lose, but because I finally understood I'd never truly belonged to them, not in the way children belong to parents. I was raised in proximity to love, not inside it. At 1:42 p.m., I walked into the lobby of the Heart Medical Administrative Building. The marble floors gleamed with a cold sterility that matched the institution's soul. Staff members glanced at me politely, offering stiff smiles of recognition. Everyone knew the Hart family. They just didn't know I wasn't one of them anymore. When I reached the conference room, the door was half open. Voices floated through, my father's low, authoritative tone, my mother's polished sweetness, Adrian's impatience, Margot's rehearsed concern. I stepped inside. My family sat aligned on one side of the long glass table. Their side was cast in soft sunlight. The chair across from them, my chair, was in the shadow. Typical. My father glanced up first. Good. You're early. His voice was clipped, businesslike. Let's keep this efficient. My mother gestured to the seat. Lena, sit. This doesn't need to be emotional. Translation, don't cry, don't argue, don't inconvenience us. Adrian slid a stack of papers across the table. These are the final documents. It's just formality. Formality, that word again. What they used whenever they wanted me compliant. I didn't touch the papers. Not yet. The family attorney, a man named Colin who'd been with our family since I was 10, cleared his throat. His eyes flickered with something, hesitation, guilt. "This is the revised trust agreement," he began. "Your removal is necessary to streamline board voting rights for the upcoming merger. It does not reflect personal sentiment." Personal sentiment. The lie people tell when they've done something unforgivable. My mother smiled sympathetically, like she was comforting a stranger, not her daughter. "Once this is done, everything will be simpler, cleaner, and you'll finally be free to live however you want." Free. A word they used like an insult. I leaned back slightly, studying each of them. My father, confident in his authority. My mother, radiant in her self-righteousness. Adrian, tapping his pen with thoughtless impatience. Margot, rehearsing empathy she didn't possess. They had no idea the ground beneath them had already shifted. Colin turned the first page. And then he froze. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he read something in the folder, something he didn't expect. The room shifted. The air tightened. My father frowned. "What is it?" he asked. Colin swallowed slowly. "There seems to be a discrepancy." My father's jaw tightened. "Meaning?" Colin lifted a sheet of paper I recognized immediately, the first email I had anonymously forwarded to him days earlier. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an accusation. It was simple, factual documentation showing an unauthorized fund transfer my father had approved, one that connected directly to the merger negotiations. A conflict of interest, a legal red flag, a roadblock. "What is that?" my mother asked, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. Colin placed the paper on the table carefully, like it was fragile. "This needs to be reviewed by the hospital's compliance department before any trust actions can proceed. We must pause the process." Pause. The word landed like a grenade. My father's face darkened. "This is ridiculous. Lena, did you—" I met his gaze calmly. "I didn't create that email," I said. "You did. Years ago." Silence cracked across the room like thin ice. My mother's voice dropped to a whisper. "Lena, why would you do this?" "Protecting myself isn't doing anything to you," I replied. "It's simply stopping you from doing something to me." Adrian slammed his pen down. "Do you have any idea what you're interrupting?" I looked at him evenly. "Yes, a process meant to erase me." My father's voice boomed. "This merger is critical. You're jeopardizing everything." I nodded slowly. "I know." They waited for me to apologize, to retract, to soften. I didn't. Because for the first time, I understood something so clearly it almost made my chest ache. Their empire depended on my silence. Their image depended on my compliance. Their power depended on my invisibility. And after 25 years, I was finally stepping out of the frame. Colin cleared his throat again. "We must halt the meeting. This requires an internal investigation." My mother pressed her hand against her necklace as if holding herself together. "Lena, sweetheart, you don't have to do this." I stood slowly. "I'm not doing anything," I said softly. "I'm simply letting the truth exist." And then I walked out. Not dramatically, not triumphantly, just quietly, the way they taught me. But this time the quiet wasn't theirs, it was mine. The Hart Medical Building lobby felt different after the meeting, brighter, sharper, almost echoing with things unsaid. My heels clicked against the marble, each step steady and certain. Halfway to the exit, I heard my name. "Lena," it was Margot hurrying toward me in soft beige heels and panic-taught expressions. Her hair was perfect, as always. Her tone was not. "Stop walking," she hissed. "We need to talk." I turned slowly. "What do you want?" She glanced around, anxious. "Not here, come with me." I didn't move, she sighed. "Fine, here then." She lowered her voice. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said simply. She looked at me like I'd spoken another language. "Why didn't you just sign the papers? It would have been easier for everyone." "For you," I corrected. "Not for me." She blinked, confused, not by the content, but by the fact that I was saying it out loud. I realized then that my family had lived so long inside their curated version of the world that honesty sounded foreign to them. Margot's voice softened in a way that was meant to sound sisterly. "Dad is furious. Mom is shaken." Adrian is losing his mind. You've blindsided everyone. A slow exhale left my chest. That's the thing, I said. I'm done being the only one who sees things coming. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Why didn't you talk to us first? Why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you warn me you were disowning me? I asked quietly. She flinched. Her silence was answer enough. I stepped past her, heading toward the revolving door, but Adrian intercepted me this time. His expression stormy, jaw clenched. You just ruined Dad's merger, he snapped. Do you understand the consequences? I nodded calmly. Do you? His eyes narrowed. You're doing this out of spite. No, I'm doing this out of survival, he scoffed. This family gave you everything. I stopped walking and turned to face him fully. You gave me assets and expectations, I said. That's not the same as love. His face reddened. You think you're better than us now because you got into some residency, because you saved a couple of emails. I shook my head. I don't think I'm better. I just think I finally stopped being worse. He stepped closer, too close. This isn't over, Lena. I stepped back. No, I agreed. It's just beginning. And then I walked away, finally, truly walked away without any part of me looking back. By the time I reached home, the adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a strange hollowness. Not sadness, not loneliness, just space. Space where fear used to be. My phone buzzed again, this time a notification from Dr. Morales. Your residency interview is confirmed for Thursday. Looking forward to it. I pressed the phone close to my chest for a moment, letting the weight of those words settle. I wasn't stepping into the unknown. I was stepping into the life I had quietly built while they ignored me. At 7:15 p.m., my email chimed again, this time from the hospital's compliance office. We've received new documentation regarding the Heart Foundation. Thank you for submitting the records. We will begin our review immediately. They didn't know I submitted them. They didn't need to. The system didn't measure legacy. It measured evidence. The same evidence my family always assumed I was too quiet, too naive, too unimportant to understand. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on my couch, and finally let my body sink into its cushions. The city lights flickered against my window, casting soft shadows across the room. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Peace, not the fragile kind, not the quiet because I'm scared kind, not the silence because I don't matter kind. This was different. This was silence by choice. Silence with weight. Silence with direction. The kind of silence you earn. The kind that reshapes futures. The kind that unsettles the people who once controlled you. I curled my legs beneath me, sipped my tea, and let the truth settle in my bones. I didn't destroy my family. They destroyed themselves. I merely stepped out of the wreckage. And now, finally, I was free to build something real. The days that followed felt like walking through a world where the gravity had changed. Everything ordinary felt slightly lighter. My steps didn't echo with the heaviness of obligation. The air didn't feel filtered through someone else's expectations. Even the way light came through the blinds in the morning felt different, unfiltered, direct. The first email arrived on a Tuesday morning. From Heart Medical Compliance Division's subject. Follow-up requests. They requested additional timestamps, digital receipts, and copies of older reports. Professional, neatly worded, detached. Not a single mention of the Hart family. Not a single warning, just fact-finding. In other words, something had cracked open. Later that afternoon, I met with Dr. Morales for my residency interview. The trauma wing was quieter than usual, maybe a shift change. Maybe the universe giving me one good moment untainted by the family I'd left behind. She walked in with the confidence of someone who didn't need applause to validate her. Her hair was streaked with silver, tied back loosely. Her eyes were sharp, kind, curious. "Lena Hart," she said, shaking my hand. "I've heard about you." Not from my family, not through social circles, not via prestige, from my work, my research, my grit. We talked for almost an hour about trauma systems, simulation modeling, logistics bottlenecks, neurosurgical triage frameworks, everything I lived and breathed for years. She asked questions that made me think, not perform. When the interview ended, she leaned back with a smile. "You're not just good," she said. "You're necessary." Necessary, a word I'd never once heard in my childhood. When I stepped out of that room, the hallway lights above me hummed like applause. Later that night, when I returned to my apartment, a note slid under my door caught my attention. A simple folded paper. No envelope. No name. My stomach tightened. I unfolded it. "We need to talk." Mom, it wasn't a threat. It was worse. It was an invitation back into the world I just escaped. I placed the note on my table without touching it again. Instead, I opened my laptop. Another email had arrived, this time from a journalist who specialized in medical board ethics. She wanted to discuss recent irregularities involving Heart Medical Foundation. She didn't mention my name, but she didn't need to. The pieces were moving, not because of me, but because truth, once released, has its own inertia. I stared at the glowing screen as the city lights flickered beyond my window. I wasn't afraid, not anymore. Instead, a strange clarity filled me, something clean and sharp. The night grew quiet, too quiet. Then my phone rang. "Adrian," I let it ring until it went silent. Then it rang again. I answered on the fourth call, not out of fear, but because I needed to hear the tone of someone who had built his entire identity on control. His voice came through tight, brittle. "What the hell did you do?" I leaned back against my couch. "I told the truth. You've started a fire you can't contain." "I don't need to contain it," I said. "It isn't mine." Adrian's breath shook. He wasn't used to losing ground. "You think this is about you? This merger affects thousands of people, millions of dollars, none of which you considered when you decided to erase me." He went silent, so I continued. "You wanted me gone, now I'm gone, and the world is seeing what you hid for years." A long, fragile pause, then a whisper. "Dad is going to break if this continues." I closed my eyes. Maybe he should have thought of that before breaking me. I ended the call before he responded, and for the first time since childhood, I felt intact. By Friday morning, the consequences became visible. The hospital board released a statement acknowledging a formal investigation. News outlets began whispering about financial discrepancies. My father's name appeared in 3 articles, not prominently, but unmistakably. My mother's face appeared on social media, pale, composed, tight-lipped, as she left the hospital in a rush. Their world was cracking. Quietly, systematically, I didn't celebrate. This wasn't triumph. This was balance. That afternoon, I submitted my residency preference list. A small act, but monumental for someone who spent her whole life being told who she should be. When I exited the hospital building, the cold wind slapped my face with a kind of raw honesty I'd grown to crave. And that's when I saw her, my mother, standing by a bench near the sidewalk, wrapped in a cream coat that probably cost more than my rent. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. "Lena," she said softly as I approached. I stopped 2 feet away. She reached out, but her hand hovered midair, hesitant, unfamiliar with the idea of asking instead of taking. "I don't know where we went wrong," she whispered. A laugh escaped me. Not mocking, just exhausted. "You never saw me," I said. "You only saw the reflection you wanted." She blinked, wounded. "We loved you in our own way." "No," I said gently. "You loved the version of me that didn't exist." Her eyes glistened. "Your father, he's breaking." "He broke me first." Silence, cold, heavy, final. "Can you forgive us?" she asked. Her voice trembled, not with vulnerability but desperation. I looked at her long and hard. "I can move on," I said quietly. "But forgiveness isn't just a word you say after the damage is done. You have to repair what you broke." "And you," she whispered. "Are you still our daughter?" I breathed in slowly. "I was," I said. "But you returned me." Her face crumpled. I stepped back. Then I walked away, not because I hated her, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood that some relationships end long before the paperwork catches up. And I was done negotiating my worth. 3 weeks later, the city felt like a different place. Maybe it was the weather shifting toward early winter. Maybe it was me. My residency acceptance letter arrived in a white envelope that felt heavier than its weight, dense with promise. "Welcome to the trauma surgery track." I placed the letter on my desk next to my simulation project, my research folders, my tea mug, everything that was mine. Everything I earned without a family name cushioning my steps. The next morning, I got dressed for my first orientation meeting. Neutral tones, tied hair, no jewelry except tiny silver studs. Not a statement, just me. When I stepped out of my apartment, the air was crisp enough to sting my cheeks. I caught a cab to Lakeshore Drive, watching the reflection of the skyline ripple along the water. My callback buzzed as the cab approached the hospital. A text from an unknown number. "He wants to see you." My breath caught, not from fear, from inevitability. My father. The hospital board had temporarily suspended him pending investigation. He had stepped down voluntarily to reduce tension. I didn't answer the text, but I went, not because he asked, because I needed closure more than he needed redemption. I found him sitting in a quiet corner of the hospital garden, a place he used to take photos with donors. Now he sat alone on a bench, hands folded, shoulders sagging under pressure he once claimed never touched him. He looked older. Gray edged his temples. His posture wasn't rigid anymore. It was tired, almost defeated. He didn't look up when I approached. He spoke first. "When did you stop trusting us?" I stood beside the bench, not sitting. "The first time I realized my achievements needed your permission to matter." He swallowed. "You think we didn't love you? I know you didn't know how to love me." His jaw tightened, not in anger, in pain. "You've ruined everything." "No," I said calmly. "I stopped letting you ruin me." He exhaled shakily. "I didn't want this to happen." "But it did," I said, "and you tried to erase me to protect yourself." He finally looked up. His eyes, once sharp with authority, were soft, almost human. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. I studied him for a long, quiet moment. It hit me then, not as anger, not as triumph, but as clarity. He wasn't asking about his life. He was asking about mine. "I'm going to save people," I said. "I'm going to build the life you never thought I deserved." His voice rasped. "Without us," I nodded. "Without you." He closed his eyes, and something inside him seemed to collapse inward, like a structure that had been unstable for years finally giving way. A long silence stretched between us, not the painful silence of my childhood, a truthful silence. He whispered, "I'm proud of you." And for the first time in my life, the words weren't enough. I didn't take them. I didn't absorb them. I let them fall to the ground like leaves, because pride offered too late is just another performance. I stepped back. He didn't ask me to stay. He knew he couldn't anymore. When I left the hospital garden, the sky above the city was shifting, clouds drifting in soft grays, sunlight breaking through in clean lines. I walked slowly, letting each breath anchor me. My phone buzzed again, a new message. Not from my family, from the residency department. "Congratulations, Dr. Hart. Orientation starts Monday." Dr. Hart, not the heart they tried to mold, not the heart they erased, the heart I built, alone, quietly, relentlessly. I walked toward the hospital entrance, my reflection mirrored in the glass doors. A woman solid in her steps, unapologetic, unbroken. Behind me, my family remained in their collapsing empire, bright, polished, empty. Ahead of me stretched a future that belonged entirely to me. And for the first time in my life, silence didn't feel like something imposed. It felt earned. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is the life you build after the people who doubted you are forced to watch from the sidelines. And that's how my story closes, not with forgiveness, not with reunion, but with clarity. I wasn't written out of their story. I simply stopped reading it and wrote my own.